thank you very much for having me. I'm going to start by asking, who already has a business? Yay! Congratulations. And the rest of you thinking about having a business, maybe? Yeah? And the others maybe just a bit unsure. Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you today about me to we. I actually don't like the sound of my mic, so I'm going to go through this one. Thank you. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how I went from me to we. So this is me. I do have more than one dress, I promise. Might be my favourite, which is why I'm wearing it again today. My name is Jemma Fairclough-Haynes. If you still like me at the end of the session, you can connect with me on any of these platforms. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram. I don't really use Twitter as much these days. And we do have a YouTube channel, but it's not updated as often as it should be. So you might be wondering how I got here, why me, okay? And there isn't anything particularly special about me. I went to university just like you guys did. I studied law, and I really had envisaged myself working for somebody for the rest of my days, because that's kind of what we do in my family. It's like you study, you get a job, you climb the career ladder, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But about 11 years ago now, I was at risk of redundancy 3 times in a row. And each time I would apply for a job, someone would say to me, "You ever thought about working for yourself?" I thought, no. I quite like the idea of working 9 to 5, too sensitive. I quite like the idea of working 9 to 5, receiving a paycheck, having holiday pay, having a company car, and again, there's nothing wrong with that. But after the 3rd time of being at risk of redundancy, I thought, this job security that I'm hanging on to just might not exist. And so I'll ask about redundancy and maybe I'll give it a go. Anyway, long story short, I asked about redundancy and it was probably the best thing I ever did. My employers didn't take too kindly to me suggesting that if they didn't want to give me voluntary, then maybe they were deliberately getting rid of people. And so I found myself accidentally jumping into this crazy world of entrepreneurship, having absolutely no knowledge of what that really meant. I didn't know what networking was. I had no idea about marketing. I'd never studied business. And I really just thought people would ring me. So much so that when I printed off 30 business cards, I rang myself to wonder why it was that nobody had rung me. I didn't understand, how you generate business. But surely enough, people started to get to know me. I went networking to find out about business. And when people say your network is your net worth, it really is. I'm still getting business now from people I met 8 or 9 years ago. So start networking now is what I'm saying. In fact, I had a client yesterday from somebody who, don't let the young looks fool you, somebody who I worked with 20 years ago, not even in the legal profession. I think it was a part-time job I had whilst I was at uni. So, treat people kindly and stay in touch. Anyhow, fast forward, 11 years later, I'm running this business and I've grown from just myself to this team of fabulous people. Some of them are employed by me, some of them are associates. And even better than that, just don't tell them I said this, I get to work with some brilliant clients, and I'm also asked to speak about various different topics in the media, both national media, local media. So you might have heard some, little shows like BBC, that sort of thing, ITV, Sky News, as well as I live in Kent, so some of the Kent stations. I got to host a radio station for a couple of years, co-host of radio stations. I've been able to be on podcasts, and each time I just meet more and more fabulous people. So I guess the real question is, well, that sounds wonderful, but how did you do that? Yeah. So I want to talk about signs that I knew I wanted to expand. Now, bear in mind, when I started the business, I had no grand plans. Didn't really have a business plan. Don't tell your business tutors that I told you that, but I didn't have a business plan. And after about 2 years of struggling to get business, I suddenly had too much. That doesn't sound like a problem, but I promise you it is. There are 2 problems to have in business. One is not enough, and the other is too much. So I have a daughter. I mention her all the time because she likes to tell me she's the longest standing employee and she deserves an award. She's 15. That gives you an idea of why she says that. And when she was, she must have been about 7, I thought, wow, we're bringing some money in, not huge amounts, but for the first time in a long time, I could see myself having a break. So I decided, I said to my husband, why don't we go on holiday? Only problem was, I couldn't go on holiday because I had too much work to do. So I said, okay, what we'll do is we'll go to Chessington. It's not too far, 3-day break. And I have 1 child, again, other problems to have, lots and lots of children who keep you very busy, or 1 child who has no one else to keep you busy and so needs you to keep her busy. So I picked up my goddaughter who's the same age and I said, right, we're off to Chessington for 3 days. We're gonna have a great time. And do you know what? I didn't go on 1 ride. And it's not just because I'm scared of heights, which is probably thinking you probably shouldn't have gone to Chessington. But it was because I found myself running back to the hotel room to have meetings and telephone calls in between the shrieks and the screams of people enjoying themselves at Chessington. And in fact, I didn't enjoy myself very much at all. So at the end of that holiday, my husband says to me, you need to hire someone. And I was like, what? Are you crazy? I've only just got myself into a position where we can kind of survive. I'm not sharing that money. And even though I'm an employment lawyer, I don't feel fully equipped to employ anybody. Also, I know what can go wrong. It's a little bit scary. But when I thought about one of the reasons for me going to business, it was to have more time. And all of a sudden, I didn't have that time. So if you're already in business or you're thinking about going into business and you're wondering, how do I know when that right time is to scale and to grow and to take somebody is? It might be that you don't have enough time for your personal activities or for your friends or family. It could be that you're working really late, or worse yet, you could be turning work away. And listen, there's nothing wrong with sharing work. Sometimes, and I still do it, we have other organisations just like ours who I think could help a client better, or perhaps we're oversubscribed at that time. There's nothing wrong with sharing the love. In fact, collaboration is always better than competition. But if you find you're doing that more than doing the work, perhaps it's time to think about growing. Or maybe you want to widen your expertise. So I have lots of friends in business now. And sometimes, maybe like for me, for instance, I do employment law. Sometimes they might notice someone keeps asking about immigration law. And so perhaps they partner with somebody or widen their expertise by bringing somebody in who does something a little bit different. So that's how I knew I needed to expand. And I was a bit scared, as I've said, I was a bit scared of expanding. I was like, oh, this is risky business. But you'll remember me saying that during the course of the years, I co-hosted a radio show, and it was a talk radio show because you might have noticed I like talking. It was one of the benefits of having that on all of my school reports. Gemma's really good, but she just doesn't stop talking. Make a living out of that now, so it's all right. Anyway, so one of the things, and I had a radio show a few weeks before going to Chessington, I had interviewed this lady called Lucy, and she had her own business in social media with her husband. But in true interviewee style, I'd asked her all sorts of questions. How did you start the business? What were you doing before? Turns out she was a paralegal working in the city, but wanted to do something different. She, at the same time of me thinking about taking someone on, had been posting on LinkedIn, I'm looking for part-time work back in the legal sector in Kent, which is where I'm based. And people kept tagging my name in it, and I kept ignoring it. Eventually I thought, why don't I just have a conversation with her? So I gave her a call and I said, Lucy, can we have a chat? Let's meet. Now bear in mind I was working from home before working from home was a thing. And so I said, let's meet in a hotel lobby. I said, I thought you had a business, what's going on? She says, well, it's not going that well. You know, it's all a bit of a facade, which happens. Sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. She said, and I think I just want to go part-time. I want to get back into law. And I said, great, I'm looking for somebody, but I can't afford you. Because I knew what she was worth. I knew she had over 15 years experience. But I said, I promise you this. If you work with me, as soon as I'm able to, I'll give you a pay rise. And she took a chance on me, and I'm really grateful for that. So during that time, I gave her several pay rises. And in fact, Lucy stayed working with me for about 5 years, which isn't too shabby, I think you'll agree, until she wanted to work closer to home. So that's how you might know that you want to expand your business. And I'll say this, and I have this conversation quite often with people who are new to entrepreneurship. There is nothing wrong with not wanting to scale, but you do have to think about what would happen if you couldn't work in your business. So you can scale in lots of different ways, but you know, if you fell sick, if something happened, could your business still survive without you? And so for me, actually, it's kind of important. And life is life. You can't guarantee what's going to happen. So in the course of running a business for 11 years, there have been periods where I've had to deal with family members being unwell, or indeed myself being unwell. And quite frankly, I like a holiday, and I don't want to be checking my emails while I'm away. So for me, scaling and growing in that way was the right thing to do. Now, in terms of building a team, there are lots of different ways to do it, and I just told you with Lucy, she started part-time. Lucy's position is now a full-time position. You can have a mixture of full-time employees, part-time employees, but if you don't want to take that risk, or if you're thinking to yourself, maybe there's another way, it can be outsourcing to other businesses. And I do that too. So as well as having my employees and my associates, sometimes I outsource to other professionals who I've met in my network. So you might want to think about doing that. And in terms of associates, let's talk about what that really is. They are freelancers, so people that are not on the payroll. It keeps my overheads low. That's a good thing to do in business. And so my 4 associates, got 4 employees and 4 associates. The bulk of the work goes to my 4 employees. And then any overspill goes to my associates. That works really well for me because it keeps my overheads low, but it means that I don't often have to turn work away. It is important that I have a contractual agreement with them. I agree a price and I pay them that price, and they're responsible for their taxes, which is good. And they're responsible for making sure they buy the equipment, which is good. But of course, for my employees, they get the benefits of holiday pay, sick pay. They don't have to buy their equipment. They get a salary regardless of whether or not I give them lots of work or not. I am pleased that I always keep them very busy. You might also think about using 0 hours workers, and Possibly, maybe by show of hands, anyone ever worked on a 0 hours contract? Yeah, of course, because it's good. We hear lots of bad press about 0 hours contracts and how wicked and terrible they are. But actually, for some people, it suits their lifestyle. Some people, it's good to used to call it the gig economy, because you do a gig and you move on. If you're at uni, you do something while you're here or while you go back home. There's no obligations. But the downside is they don't really have an obligation to you. And it's not, too sensitive. It's not illegal to have a 0 hours contract, contrary to what you might read in the papers. It might get a little bit more difficult with the new employment law regulations, but it's not impossible, so my advice would be just seek advice on it, if that's the way you want to go. Or maybe you're just hiring some fixed term help, so maybe you've got a project or an increase in product or a particular holiday is coming up and you know your product or service is going to be needed for that. Hire somebody on a 4-week, 6-week, 3-month, 9-month contract. That's still something that you can do, and I have done. Now, this is something that you really do need to think about when you're going from me to we, is how will that person work with you? Because I remember, bear in mind I was working from home, I remember thinking, now, I've met this woman and I like her, but I'm not sure I want her in my house all the time. No offence to her, but I was like, how's this going to work? And so we started working in a co-working space. I needed an office because of the nature of my business, but you might not. So in the office spaces that I work in, we have, I think there are about 16 offices, and other than that, there are lots of hot desking spaces. I think they said there's about 80 or 90 businesses in there that work out of there at any one time. And that worked out really, really well for me because I get clients from my co-workers. My employees have other people to talk to besides me and ourselves, and as a small business, that's quite good. They provide the tea, the coffee, the biscuits, the cake, the pizza days, which is great. And it's a really buzzy environment. So if I've got a question about business, I can ask somebody else who is in business and get a really good perspective, as opposed to speaking to somebody who doesn't know about business. I highly advise against that. Your family members, your friends, your well-wishers may wish you well, but if they don't know about business, they might not be the best people to turn to. Because you've got to have a certain level of risk and you've got to have a certain way of thinking. So one thing to do is to think about how and where you'll work from. And then to think about client contact. Like, do you want, especially if you're working with freelancers, associates, or other businesses, do you want these people to have access to your entire client base? You might be okay with that, but then again, you might not. So you might think about, well, how do I lock that down? And for me, what was really important is my brand identity. So guess what colour our brand is? It's definitely purple. It's my favourite colour. It's bold and apparently creative, which is funny because I'm not that creative. But for me, brand identity is really important. So whether you're an employee, whether you're an associate, whether you're a business working with us, I know that when you step out that door, whether that's virtual or in person, you've got to represent Orchard really, really well. One thing of the things that I'm often complimented on are my personal identity and the business brand identity. Quite often people go, oh, they're the purple ladies. Because sometimes we wear purple when we go out to events. We've got purple pens, we've got purple books, but it's more than that. It's more than just the colour and the logo. It's how we talk to people. We like to think we're quite approachable, quite friendly. We use plain English where possible. We meet people at their level. Not everybody does that. And so you might want to think about, and you might not know what your brand identity is, let's be real, but think about what your brand identity is and make sure that others align with that. I've had a few employees who haven't worked out And I can say that one of the reasons is they didn't align with our brand identity. And you want to protect that at all costs. And then if you are going to employ people, these are the legal things, make sure you've got employer's liability insurance, which is surprisingly cheap. You don't necessarily need to insure yourself for £10 million unless you're tendering for a really expensive project with a government agency. So you will need some liability, but make it meet you where you're at. And actually today, one of my co-workers and I, we were having a conversation, and he's a business, I just worked him and his wife, and he says, I don't have employer's liability because I only employ my wife and it's not really employing her. And I said, you should get it. You know, for the two of you, you're probably not going to pay more than £80 to £100 a year. You know, £6 a month. If she were to break her leg because she was out on a shoot with somebody, at least you could claim against yourself. So even if you're thinking to yourself, I have no intention of employing 100 people, I'm not trying to be the next, business mogul taking the world by storm. You should though, I encourage you to do that. It might be something you think about getting. And of course, there's the paying the tax and the national insurance if you're employing them in any way. So those are sort of the legal things to consider. Now, even if you're working with people who are self-employed, make sure you have a contract. This will really encourage you. Make sure you get terms and conditions. And they might not be the best ones to begin with, but something is better than nothing. And then as soon as you're in a position to improve on that, improve on it. That's okay. Even me, myself, we have terms and conditions between us and our clients. We call them service level agreements or SLAs. And just recently I've updated our SLAs because I thought, they could be a bit better. And I'm very fortunate to know people who can advise me on the best people to look at my service level agreements, and so I've improved those. But always have something in place, even if you're working with your family and friends. So there's some of the legal things that I would love you to consider. But don't forget the culture. Whoever it is you're working with, I've spoken about the brand identity and what they portray to the world. But another thing that's really important is, if you're working with people, is do they pass the vibe check? Like, what's the culture of your organisation? Because for us, we're serious people. We do serious business, but we're quite unserious people. You will hear so much laughter in our office. But also, if somebody's in need, you'll see somebody comfort someone. I don't monitor every minute of every day of what my staff are doing. I treat them like adults. If they've got to go to a GP appointment, go to your GP appointment. Go to a Christmas show that your children are doing. Go ahead. However, don't take the mick. Yeah? Because as nice as I am, there's another side. There's another side. But and it actually doesn't happen, I'll be honest with you. My staff member, my team, they are wonderful. And I think I'm right in saying they appreciate the culture, and so they give back. If we've got to stay 2, 5, 10 minutes behind, they tend to do it. But when somebody new's coming in, they might not have that. It's really hard when you've built a business from scratch as a founder. There isn't anybody who's really going to be as passionate about that business as you. And you kind of have to accept that. Yes, you want people to work well, and you hope that they're passionate about what it is that you provide, whether that's a product or a service, but they're not going to have the exact same investment as you do. But treating each other well, having a good culture, not having that toxicity, backing your team members, all of that is really important. Because if you're having a good time, even on the bad days, and sometimes they come, the not so good days, but even if you're having a good time, even on the not so good days, it's okay, you can get through it, can't you? So this is something that I really struggled with. Bear in mind I'd worked by myself for 2 years. I was like, but my clients really like to work with me. And I still have some clients that are like, yeah, but can we speak to Jemma? You know, that's who they got to know. Quite often I'm the face of the business, so when I bring the business in, maybe I've met someone networking, my face is all over the website. I'm trying to change that, I promise. I'm the one that does the interviews, and so they think, I want to speak to that person. So how do you build trust? How do you wean your clients off you, but still ensure they have a great service? And also, I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's not the clients, sometimes it's a little ego, sometimes you don't want to hand them over because can my team really do it like me? I promise you, they can. So one of the secrets that we do is that if I've met somebody, or they've worked with me for a long time, or I've got a new staff member, I still have a meeting with my client, and I make sure then I then bring that team member in with me to those meetings and gradually hand them over. I'll go, okay, so yeah, I heard what you say. Kim's going to send you an email about that. Right, that's great. Jeanette's going to pop in and do that for you. Wonderful, you'll be hearing from Natalie. You drop that in a little bit subliminally and they learn that you trust this person. The client then doesn't feel abandoned, because that's quite important. You don't want your clients to feel abandoned. And make sure that you do not regularly, but often just check in, have a look at that work, which comes back to how are you working together. So for me, and for a lot of organisations, we use something called a CRM, Client Relationship Manager. They come in various different software, they come in various different ways. And so I can see all of what's going on in the business, every email that's been sent, every bit of correspondence. Also means that if someone's off for the week, someone suddenly falls sick, if a client calls, I can say, give me a minute. I'll just have a read back through the notes, and all the notes of every meeting, every telephone call, every email is there. But that also gives your clients that reassurance that they know what's happened, So if your client's like, yeah, but I've been working with you for a year, are they really going to know what happened 9 months ago? They are, because I will brief them. So in short, that's how I went from working from me, just me on my own, to over the last almost 11 years, growing to a team of 8. And I'd invite you to ask me any questions.
Thank you so much, Jemma. That was really insightful, and I'm sure you all agreed. We've got plenty of time for questions, so does anybody want to kick us off? Oh, okay, I saw that hand first.
So my business is called Girlsville, and I'd really like to build a team that embody that, like the Girlsville mentality. So my question is, when you first started, where did you find the networking events?
Oh. My very first networking event that I went to that I didn't know was a networking event, I just found on Google, and I went to my local chamber of commerce. So I think like every town, city has one. Just looked at their website. Bear in mind I had no money, so I went to the free events. And then from there, I met people, and I'd say, so where do you hang out then? What do you do? And I went to more networking events. I went to, very early on, I went to this Women in Business networking, and they have loads of them. That might be where you find your tribe. And at the end of that session, the woman running it said to me, Jemma, do you like Indian food? And I was like, yeah. She said, do you want to go for dinner? I said, definitely. And when I went home, I was like, oh my gosh, this could be my first client. I've made this great impression. But when I turned up for dinner, there were 16 people there. I wasn't that special. This was a networking event. And it was really good. From there, people told me other things that they were doing. So these days, though, you can look on Eventbrite. There are lots of, this is not an endorsement of anything, but there's Women in Business Network, there is Athena Group, there is ladies who latte. So if you're about finding like-minded women, that's where you'll find them. But don't exclude anybody. Just because somebody isn't a woman doesn't mean they won't know people who know people. And I always think it's not necessarily about the people you meet today, it's who they know. Everybody has a network, right? So yeah.
Amazing. There was another hand.
Thank you for your speech, first of all. And my question is, building a team, what's the main criteria you base your search on for choosing the right people?
So that's really changed over the time in terms of what have I based my criteria on. And qualifications and skill set is important, but above that, it's willingness it's willingness. So you could have the best qualifications and the best experience. That might get you through the door in an interview, but for me, it's not going to get you the job. Like, I want to know a bit more about you. What made you apply to this business specifically? Like, have you done your research? How do you feel about working in a small business? It's very different to working in a large organisation. You've got to see my mug every day. How are you going to cope with that? Do you know what I mean? How are you going to cope with your challenges? That sort of, when I talk about the vibe check, that's really important. The qualifications and skills will get you through the door, but have you got the right attitude? Because I can teach you virtually anything. In fact, one of my team members, she has moved from being my executive assistant into an HR role. She's been working with me for 3 years because I can teach you. If you've got the right attitude, I can teach you, but I can't teach you on your attitude.
Yes.
Yeah.
So true. I think attitude is definitely the key word here. Other question here.
I heard you mention about the importance of having a team. How do you convince people to join or trust your team if you're like a small business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I talked about brand, and there are multiple types of brand. One of them is your employer brand. Now, before I had a team, I had no employer brand. It was just me. So I had to rely on my personal brand. And if anyone does follow me, I am a prolific poster. I post on LinkedIn quite often about business, about what I'm doing, about where I am. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll get a little bit more insight into some of the sporty things that I'm into. And I think people gravitate to people like them. So in the first instance, it was just working with me, and I was very transparent about that. I didn't use we when it was I was very much I. And then as the team has grown, I had to ask my team, so what do you like about working here? Because I can tell you what I think it's like. But when I asked them, they said other things like, you know what, we're always learning. No 2 days are the same. We like that. You're fairly flexible. We go out as well. We make sure for Christmas, we went to Crystal Maze, and then we went to Soho for dinner. The place in which we work, at the co-working space, is quite funky and nice. I like to think of it as Kent's Google offices. It's not really, but it feels a bit like it. So, in answer to your questions, if it's just you, make sure you're constantly posting about what it is you're doing and how you're doing it. But if you've got a team, ask them already. Like, ask what's really good. And if you don't get anything, then oops.
Do we have any more questions? Yes.
I just want to ask you that people are kind of in the competition stage of the business nowadays. What kind of challenges you face in the beginning of your business? Is there failures or struggles? I like to know about them.
How long have we got then? Is that the question? Did I have challenges and failures in my business? Of course. Of course. So one of my challenges, I think I kind of alluded to that, was firstly not knowing how to market myself. That was like, what do you mean I've got to market myself? How do I do that? It wasn't just meeting people. I didn't really understand what I was offering. Another challenge that I had was in the beginning, my prices were way too cheap. And people might think that being cheap is a good thing, but for me it meant that people didn't place value in what I did. So I'd have no shows, or I'd have people just not buy in because, I say this, if I offered you a genuine bar of gold for 10 pence, would you take it? No, you'd think it was fake. You'd be like, where did you make that in the kitchen? So over time I had to learn my value. Not doing that meant some clients took the mick, the ones that I did have. Not having strong enough terms and conditions. Late payments affected cash flow. I don't like to ask for things, and not asking people for payment and being like, hey, pay. Didn't quite say it like that, but, not understanding that. Not having a system in place was a real big failure. There were so many. Yeah.
Don't shy away from failures. How do you know?
Yeah, it's good.
Just have a quick question about delegating, because I feel like for myself I'm going to struggle sort of giving responsibility to other people and sort of the sales or the important parts of my business. So my question is, how do you overcome sort of not trusting other people?
Yeah, that's a hard one. So in the first days, I remember my first sort of working with Lucy, I was like, yeah, I'm just doing this. And then she was really good actually at saying to me, do you think I could do that? But one of the things you can do, I had a business mentor for a short while, and he told me to write down a manual. Now, if you are giving everybody the tools, then you can feel sure that when you delegate that task or responsibility to them, that they'll be able to do it. Nowadays, I'd say video what you're doing. Video it, put that into some probably AI tool or something, and then people can do what you're doing. But you can check. You can check things before they go out, right? So yeah.
Just if you need to nip out, please just do the feedback survey before you head off. We've got some time for a few questions.
Doing a good talk, thank you. Wanted to know, when you had those challenges, what kept you going?
I don't, I'm not going to lie and say I believed in myself and I knew I would get here, because honestly that was not the case. And I really admire those people who knew they'd still be there in 10 years' time. But for me, I set myself short goals. So like, if I can make it through the next 3 months, then I'm good. And then if I can make it through the next 3 months, then I'm good, So for me, personally, that's what would work. And then there comes a time when you look back and there's so much good that you can't give that up, because you've proven to yourself that you can overcome and you can do things, and then you start to see the glimmer of hope.
I love that. Did you have a question?
Thank you for your talk. So my question is how long it take for you to get the first customer, and I would like an insight regarding I have a project idea, which is giving the student the best experience in social life in the UK. As many students facing difficulties for getting on track, finding their way, so especially anxiety and a lot of social problems. And lastly is, what is your future ambitions? Are you thinking to expand or for growth?
Oh, so your first question was, remind me, what was the first question?
Getting your first client.
Oh, so my first client took 6 months to get, and then my next client took another 6 months. But now, we have several inquiries a month which turn into clients. So it is slow burn, I think however long you think it's going to take, just double it and add some. It's quite normal, again, talking with my co-workers today, and some of them are like 2 years in business and they're like, we're only just starting to break even. That's quite normal, that is quite normal. And then you were telling me about the project you have, the idea. I think that's a great idea. You just need to think about how you're going to monetize it, because doing good is wonderful, but somehow you've got to pay for it. So whether that's through, there might be grants available, or are these students going to pay for it themselves? Just think about how you're going to monetize it. And then your third?
No, I just want to start by free.
You want to start for free? You can start for free if you make it clear it's free for now, because again, you've got to move those people on. Or maybe they give you a review. Yeah, that's another thing. You can be like, if you do this, maybe give a review. Yeah. And then the last thing you asked me was?
What are your future ambitions for your business?
Oh, world domination, baby. So my ambition has always been, even from the start, was if I grow this thing and it works, then eventually I want to sell. It's one of the reasons why it doesn't have my name attached to it. But yeah, eventually, not anytime soon, but eventually sell and probably start something again. There's one more.
We look forward to seeing the journey. We're running out of time, so what we'll do is we'll wrap it up. We've got about 5 minutes. If anybody wants to go directly to Jemma to ask some questions, then you can. She will need to leave us on stage, so just so you know. Please do not leave this room without completing the feedback. And also, I think we can all give Jemma another massive round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.